Good morning to you, Karen. Well, like you said, Asian markets are showing a mixed picture. The Greater China markets are seeing some weakness due to slowdown concerns in China. And moving on to another story of the day, Alibaba.com said 84% of shareholders have approved a $2.5 billion buyout offer from its parent to take the company private. It's mostly traded to the downside as Greek election relief was replaced by G20 indifference and more Spanish debt headaches. And in Australia, the ASX retreated slightly as well, down about 0.3%. Central bank minutes showed Eurozone fears are still very alive and kicking. And lastly, a much better picture over in India, with the Sensex trading to the upside, gaining about 0.5% at the moment, and that's after falling yesterday on that surprise pause from the RBI. Kelly, back to you. Is the only one that traded in negative territory this morning. And China's major financials continue to recover today. The official China Securities Journal says Beijing should cut interest rates soon to avoid volatile economic growth and build confidence. Asian bourses rose across the board in anticipation of Fed Chief Ben Bernanke's testimony later Tuesday. In China, the Shanghai Composite finished up 0.6%, rebounding from three-year lows. Construction-related stocks led the broader market gain. Good morning to you, Karen. Well, markets in the Asian region are showing a lot of red. I'll tell you, it's certainly not a great time to be listing your company's shares in Asia. Local media quotes the deputy director of the province planning agency as saying local authorities has no plan to stimulate the housing market. I'll leave it there. Now over to Karen in London. Take a look at the picture behind me. India's poor fourth quarter GDP number compounded a regional sell-off prompted by mounting concerns over Spanish banks. So Ross, not a very pretty picture overall, but I guess we should all breathe a sigh of relief as the month of May is finally over. All right. Back over to you, Kelly. Kelly, you know what? If these deals go through, Chinese companies will soon play a very important role in determining global oil prices. Nexen and Talisman control around a third of the dwindling UK North Sea oil output. As investors digest the July HSBC Flash China PMI, some took comfort in the numbers while others just shrugged them off.
What do you make of it?
That's right, Kelly. It's quite a number, I'll tell you. China's May PMI marks the weakest reading so far this year. The official data covers mostly China's biggest state-run firms. According to the data, output is becoming a big problem. In May, it came in at the lowest level since November last year. A lot of red in Asian bourses, mainly because that dashed hope for more stimulus from Beijing. And China's influential academics said in leading state-backed newspapers that China needs an appropriate amount of investment to spur growth, and Beijing should not launch a new round of aggressive stimulus. The Shanghai Composite continued to show some softness, closing down nearly 1% on this very choppy trading day. And Japan's Nikkei firmed, hitting the highest closing in 6 weeks on improved sentiment as selling slowed ahead of mid-year reviews. It's buying the helicopter assets of its largest shareholder, AV China. The assets have a reported price tag of more than $500 million. I'll leave it there. Now over to Becky in London. Investors fear that Beijing will come up with new property restrictions after July's housing prices rose by the biggest margin in more than a year. But Hong Kong shares also snapped a 5-day winning streak. Weakness in oil giant, as you can see here, PetroChina down about 2.5%, outweighs strength in defensive plays. Although total Chinese outbound investment is still small compared to the size of its economy, most analysts believe the country is on the verge of a global shopping spree. About 98% of all deal value generated in the first quarter was done by China's mega billion-dollar state-owned enterprises. Back to you. Louisa, Asian markets are showing more recovery today. Investors have regained risk appetite amid chatters of the possibility of QE3 as well as a rate cut from the PBOC. U.S. stocks suffered their biggest weekly outflow in 2 years as investors opted for bonds, pushing Treasury yields to record lows. And even as comments from ECB chief Mario Draghi sparked a furious rally in markets, some analysts say investors anticipating a full-fledged QE will be disappointed. Find out more only on our website, CNBC.com. Japanese manufacturing activity dipped in July to 47.9. That is compared to June's PMI number of 49.9, marking the fastest pace of decline since the earthquake of last year. While Asian markets rose for the most part, banking on future central bank stimulus, but the Shanghai Composite still showed some weakness, losing nearly 1%. And over in Tokyo, the Nikkei firmed on stimulus expectations as well. Several strong earnings reports also outweighed sluggish factory data. And moving on to China's third largest insurer, China Pacific Insurance, the company warned that net profit for the first half would fall by 55% due to slowing premium growth and a decline in investment income. Despite the dismal news, China Pacific is actually up more than 1.5% at 22.79 in Shanghai. Chloe, it's back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that.
It inched up during the morning trade, gaining about 0.5% at 23.59. Property plays widely gained on investors' hopes for looser government controls. Back to you, Sri.
Tracy, thank you so much.
And finally, some upbeat news on the corporate earnings front. Qingdao Haier shares rallied nearly 6.5% this morning thanks to strong sales of its high-end Carsarte brand. Adam, back to you.
Thanks very much, Faith.
Asian markets are all firmly in negative territory. Take a look at Japan's Nikkei. It shed about 3%, locked a 7th straight weekly losses, marking the longest such run since the third quarter of 2001. Check out one stock that's bucking the upward trend today, Sonoma Engineering. Its shares are under pressure after the company said its first half net profit likely fell by between 30 to 50% due to a steep decline in product prices. That's a look at the mainland market. Good morning to you, Becky. Well, markets in the Asian region are mostly recovering today. We're seeing a lot of green with the exception of the Hang Seng Index, 0.3%, while the Shanghai Composite also showing some weakness, down 0.4% at 23.41. Ahead of policy decisions from the European Central Bank and Bank of England later today. Take a look at Japan's Nikkei 225. It's showing some softness, down about 0.3%. But the stock of China Eastern Airlines bucking the trend today, gaining nearly 2.5%. And that is despite a carrier's warning of a net profit decline of more than 50% for the first half of 2012. Here in the Asian markets headed south again as investors avoided risky plays ahead of the EU summit. The Shanghai Composite recovered a bit from earlier lows to finish down about 0.1%. Brokerages and property plays outperformed the broader market. ICBC is the top player by volume on China's gold and futures exchanges, but its participation in foreign markets is limited to over-the-counter trading, which reached a total $90 billion last year. And now over to Becky in London. Happy Friday. I'll tell you, Asian markets were the first to respond to that big Moody's bank downgrade. And as you might guess, we saw red across the board. The Greater China markets went in a couple different directions. The Shanghai Composite fell more than 1% as lower commodity prices hit shares in the energy and materials sectors. But Hong Kong shares tumbled, underperforming Asian peers due to weakness in China-exposed consumer names. Shares of Chow Tai Fook Jewelry tanked nearly 8% on dismal quarterly earnings, adding to fears that sluggish domestic demand will hurt corporate profitability.
欢迎您收看 CNBC 环球市场报道。人民币对美元汇率近日再创新高，中国货币近2天来强劲的走势，更使人们将目光集中到了美国参议院即将投票的货币政策上。尽管大多数人呢对社交网络的态度是爱恨交加的，但谁也不能否认或者忽视社交网络已经形成的巨大的社会影响力。但购买 Facebook 的首发股是否是一项非常明智的投资呢？下面我们一起来听一下股神巴菲特的见解。 在日本福冈县破坏性的核危机爆发仅1年之后呢，来自世界各地53个国家的官员都聚集到了韩国的首都。Stratford 公司的 Colin Chapman 告诉 CNBC， 尽管核危机爆发于1年之前，人们对核能的利用仍然存在着很大的分歧。 美国参议院以79票赞成、19票反对，赢得了对此项货币政策进行辩论的权利。如果这项立法得到通过，美国将从所有故意低估其货币价值的国家征收更多的进口关税。以上就是国泰航空首席执行官 John Slosser 接受 CNBC 独家专访的画面。从 CNBC 亚太总部为您播报，我是常新月，非常感谢您的收看。